This is January 15th, 2016. We're talking about state and collaboration for Jupyter. And we forgot to hit record earlier, so we missed a little bit of the earlier discussion. Sorry, folks. There's some notes on HackPad.
It's the Jupyter HackPad application state meeting from today.
Thank you.
So January 15th. Yeah.
The question is, I want to collaborate with you on one notebook, but we may also be using a plugin that hasn't enabled collaboration yet. For example, we have a plugin for image drawing, like an actual image sketching plugin, and whoever authored it hasn't developed real-time collaboration for it yet. So that thing is capable of saving, I don't know, like a Microsoft Paint style bitmap editor, but it isn't collaborative. So we have something in the system that is collaborative next to one that isn't collaborative. And sure, maybe the moment we hit save, we can see the file. And
I think
so.
But if we're implementing the application state, if all we have to do is implement collaboration for the application state, and automatically the plugin becomes collaborative, right? Because if it can accept state changes from the server and post state changes to this JSON database, I mean, we're taking care of the collaborative aspect of that.
I mean, you're sort of assuming that that would be true if every single data structure that it uses operates on this model, right? If
right.
Absolutely.
So if they use the state, if they use our state object.
For everything, for absolutely.
Right.
If there's not a single call.
If that is their state.
Yeah, if the only thing they're representing is state contained in data structures that have this synchronization capability, then yes, then they would be automatically collaboratively enabled.
Yeah.
But it is possible for someone to implement something that uses standard JavaScript libraries that don't know, and that will be a case. I mean, people are going to bring in existing tools and existing libraries. Right.
So in that case, for example, it wouldn't be saved because what we're saving is stuff out of the state.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly they could implement something that is purely client side, that's not saved, not shared, not collaborative, et cetera, just by not using our state object.
Mm-hmm. Or they could just use the contents API directly, and that's theirs.
Exactly. And then they're setting to disk. They're saving content, and then they're done, they're sending content with Contents API back to disk on the server, which is
right. So if they bypass
a reasonable thing to do.
If they bypass the storage object, then yeah, of course we're not syncing any of that.
Yeah, so I think it sounds like we want to be able to collaborate on an individual plugin.
At the plugin level, yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to be able to collaborate on the
plugin? Not even a plugin level, the plugin instance level, right?
Yeah, sorry, that's what I mean. So a single open notebook.
Right.
Do we want to also be able to collaborate on the application level, like share a workspace? Because it sounds like, for the most part, you generally don't want to do that. But do we want it to be possible?
Yeah, so like the current open directory typically wouldn't be shared. The current doc panel arrangement wouldn't be shared. The contents of the terminals right now in SageMath Cloud is collaborative through the terminal file, through a file that sits next to the terminal that represents the state of the terminal. So it's automatically collaborative just based on the collaborative sort of file system.
So let's see, the reasons for not enabling collaboration on that seem to be simplicity. On the other hand, I can imagine two reasons for trying to support that. One is you can imagine, for example, teaching scenarios or environments where you want a bunch of people to be able to follow what you're doing at the entire application level, effectively one-way synchronization and broadcasting scenarios, where it may be handy to say, What's that?
Like a demo of the this application, for instance.
Right.
Itself, yeah.
Or even
more
simpler.
than one plugin.
Even simpler, I just want to open up 2 windows.
And that was the other one, exactly. Even yourself saying, I just want to be able to recover this entire state myself into Windows, and I don't want to have to reconstruct it. So
like I'm moving from my laptop to my desktop or something like this.
All right.
Exactly.
I think I think if we can collaborate on the plugin instance level, it shouldn't be significantly different to be able to collaborate on the application level.
Because the main application is a plugin. I mean,
yeah, I think the main difference is if we only implement the application one, we might have some nested, like we store an entire application in one place, and then you wouldn't be able to collaborate on a subset of that.
Right.
But I think going the other way isn't.
Yeah, going up to broader things shouldn't be problematic just because everything is a plugin.
It's just a bigger state object, right?
Right.
Okay.
Just so even for the same plugin, you could have a situation where you want to share the scroll position just because you are demoing something, or not. So you may have different modes on what is part or not of the application state.
Oh, hey, Kyle.
That's true. If you're sharing your dock panel layout, you might want to share the scroll position in the notebook as part of your state. That's a good point. But typically, I don't think you want to share the scroll position in your notebook.
Except for a demo mode or some sort of teaching context where you want to be able to take over the layout and show things.
Right. These kind of follow along type things.
But is that better served by screen sharing?
I was going to say that becomes almost screen sharing, and I would say let's not try to solve all the problems right now, since that begins to look almost like screen sharing. Let's say, well, for now, if you're really doing something that feels almost like screen sharing, well, there is such a thing invented already. So let's do that. Right.
I just think that instead. Multiple modes for the same plugins.
Yeah, I guess questions like this are kind of telling us which properties are part of the state.
Yeah.
And do we want that to change, which is Sylvan's point? Do we want to change which properties are part of the state? Do I want to start logging the scroll position so it can be shared?
Yeah, and it sounds like it makes sense to at least start with scroll position not being persisted. So like there's a question. If you refresh the workspace, should it forget your scroll position?
Ugh.
Or is that some state that is
the currently selected cell should be saved, right? That's part of the state,
but that's gonna determine the
renderer should make sure. Yeah, the renderer should make sure the currently selected cell is in there.
But then doesn't that mean if you're syncing the currently selected cell?
No, the selected cell should be so a common use case, right, is 2 people working on a notebook. They're obviously working in different cells. Well, not obviously, but typically. And so you don't want so you have to have selected cell per person, right? If that means that
there's something slightly beyond. Okay, so there is a distinct notion of resuming your own session and the live collaboration state. Those are there is more.
Yeah, okay. I think it's just a distinction of do I sync this with myself or with everybody for every piece of syncable data.
But it does mean we do need to have both of those things as the
right.
state.
So you have to be able to at the attribute level to be able to select that state. Either say persist to myself or persist to everybody.
Is this part of my application session, or is this some of the project information that's shared to everybody?
But isn't this just what cursors, just a very generalized notion of cursors, and cursors have identifiers, and that identifier can be you even multiple times. I mean, if you go to Google Docs and you open the same Google Doc in two different windows side by side, you see your own cursor more than once. You just see it in different colors.
That's right.
Yeah, but that also means there is
SageMath Cloud too.
Yeah, in a general sense, there is state. So, well, I guess this is relevant, right? Because if you reload a Google Doc, does it preserve your cursor position? I don't actually know.
I don't think it can. It doesn't know which cursor position. Yeah. Well, right.
I honestly don't know because that's the kind of thing I wouldn't notice.
Yeah. I don't.
So there is.
The question is, what information is in the URL in some sense, right? Is it a per browser window per tab session state? Because two tabs can certainly have different cursors, right? In different places.
They do, in fact. In Google Docs, every time you open the same doc, even if it's yourself with the same identity, you get a new cursor.
Is the URL different?
The same. It's the same URL.
Okay, so then you can't. Okay, so then you can't preserve the cursor position, right? Because the only information you have on a refresh is the URL.
The URL. No, in fact,
you have local storage stuff, but we don't want to go there, I think.
It's not just that you can't preserve the cursor position; it's that deliberately you don't, because you can in Google Docs. You may want on a big monitor have the same document open in two different places and be editing simultaneously yourself the document in more than one place, and that's allowed.
Right. So if you
but if you open it again, does it always open it? So if you close those and then you open it again, does it just open it and scroll and start you at the very top?
It opens it always
at the
top.
start.
Okay.
It always opens at the top. Yeah.
So we're talking about not. So we will never.
There's some state that's ephemeral.
Cells.
Yeah, there is a little bit of
currently selected cell is ephemeral.
Yeah, there is a little bit of state that is ephemeral and that the user has to reconstruct while they're using the application. That is truly ephemeral.
So if you refresh the application, you lose the current selected cells. But you.
I'm sure we have that in Hackpad too.
The layout. You keep the layout of your notebooks. So which notebooks are currently open?
Yeah, I would think so. That to me is workspace state or whatever you want to call it. Lab state.
Yeah, that would be really frustrating if you painstakingly arranged 5 windows with notebooks and terminals and everything, and that's like your work. If it took you 30 minutes every time you started up to like open everything up again.
Yeah, that is on the roadmap for doc panel.
To preserve that kind of state, or to at least expose
and restore.
That kind of state. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Although we probably don't want to get in the business of saving different perspectives layout and all, like in many IDEs. I think this is always very confusing.
Saving what?
Like in code blocks, for example, for C++, you can save different perspectives that correspond to different layouts. And whether you have a debugging layout or some other development layout, etc.
Eclipse lets you do that too. Do people like that or not? I've never.
The only place I've ever used it is Photoshop, which lets you, or Lightroom, which lets you define kind of UI setups for different activities, because those things have so many controls.
Well, Lightroom is so constrained. Okay, yeah.
I've used a debug perspective in Eclipse for debugging FPGAs, and I did like the context shift there.
Yeah, I think I've used it before in Eclipse, and it was good.
You like being able to save a particular layout perspective and being able to switch in and out of it and completely rearrange the UI?
I think it's an advanced use case, but it's certainly a valid one.
I don't think that something like that's too hard if the workspace or whatever is named, right? So if this is, server URL /lab/foo.
Default.
It's funny how I jumped in to say I didn't like it, and now everybody wants it.
Yeah, I just mean it. I don't think it. Even if you don't like it, I mean, you don't use it, right? This is supported in a lot of things. Most people don't use it, but I don't think I don't think it adds anything to the technical difficulty.
There are many IDEs that force it upon you and makes it, very so pervasive everywhere that you need to understand what is their logic about it.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to do that because if, like, for instance, if you just store this based on the URL or the path or whatever, then if you only ever use the root path, this is a feature that effectively doesn't exist.
Right. So to recap from Matthias and Kyle, here, let me do the short demo again, just because I guess they probably haven't seen it yet. Share my screen. I think this is the right window. Is that the right window?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. So here's sort of the application as it stands right now. So on the left-hand side, you have commands to do whatever. This is command palette, and a file listing. You can double-click or drag. Files, and you got Python files, and so each thing that you drag or each thing that you open up invokes some sort of opener plugin. There's somebody say this is a PNG file, so open it up in an image thing. There's a notebook viewer. There's a terminal and a text editor. So here's your notebook viewer. Here's a terminal. So so here's the application sort of as it stands right now. And of course, each one of these things you can drag around or resize, etc. So so these are the sorts of things we're talking about when we talk about state. And I think we said there's a hackpad that we're working on. It's in the chat for the video of the Blue Jeans. And we're saying that we want a global state object.
No sign.
Can you not hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we're fine.
Oh, okay. Okay. Apparently Sylvan can't hear me. So there's a global state manager. Each plugin can request a namespace in that state manager, and the state manager is like a JSON database, and you can post changes to that database locally, or it can receive changes from the server, and the plugins request, anytime something in this specific namespace changes, let me know, and then it can update a view based on that. And for things like a text editor that as you're typing in, instead of getting the text, posting the change, waiting till the notification comes back and rendering it, you can optimistically render it. When you post a change, if the change is not applied, you get a rejection message. Or maybe if there's a merge, guys, we should let the plugin know that the change that you said wasn't exactly applied, but we did our best effort and we applied something. I don't know. Maybe there should be some merge logic in there. So you can optimistically render and then revert based on a rejection message.
So this application has to have the concept of identity baked into it all the way through, because the concept of of a default ownership and identity has to be present pretty deeply, precisely, to know where these changes are coming from, right? And has that been encoded everywhere already?
So some sense of provenance of the changes?
Yeah, because you have to know sort of who's sending these changes. If you see more than one cursor, you have to be able to flag visually the ownership of those cursors. For example, you have to say this is JSON, and this could be JSON on window A and JSON on window B, and this is Fernando.
So you don't need to bake provenance into the view layer, right? You can just say, like with cursors, you have multiple cursors, and there's just some tag information that says, this cursor, you should tag it with this information. It's owned by so and so. You should display this, that it's owned by so and so. So at the view layer, you don't care about who's doing what the user is doing, but maybe at the at some layer you need a concept of ownership, or a concept of
but even at the view layer, you have to be able to represent the notion that there is more than one, and that these things come with some attribute to flag a little bit of metadata that says this is a cursor with a name, for example, rather than simply a black bar. Because if you have more than one, you have a UX problem.
Yeah, so the view layer should be able to deal with here's the state is here's 5 cursors, and this is the current cursor that you're dealing with. This is the current cursor that you control, and the other 4 cursors are tagged with this data.
Exactly.
But whether that data is user information or whatever information, it doesn't matter in the view layer.
Yeah, and from an implementation standpoint, your real actual cursor and the little widgets that are used to represent other people's cursors are really unrelated. Objects, right? Because one is an actual insertion point, and the other is just an indicator of what somebody else is doing.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I don't think that you have the notion. I mean, at this level, you don't have the notion of user anyway, because you'll have multiple sessions running as the same user, and you need to distinguish between those. So it's the notion of session that you want, I think, at this level.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine. I'm trying to think what notions of sort of session identity we encode where, but also so that we get this thing ready to play nicely with the hub that does have the concept of users, so that the meshing is as clean as possible, because the two have to interlock with one another.
Right. I think the server is the one that needs to maintain the session user mapping, because you don't want that to be tampered with, right? You don't want the client to be saying, I'm actually this user. So the session,
the authentication mechanism also, because you're presumably authenticated with the state system, and that can be used to identify the user making the transactions.
Right. So when a change comes in, so you have a client having state information, it posts a change to the server. The server is the one that says, oh, this comes from this particular session. I know that because I'm maintaining a communication channel with that session, and that session corresponds with this user, so that's who I should provenance, whatever the word is, provenance the change with. This is the user that change corresponded to. Questions about big ideas? I do want to discuss how a plugin requests a namespace, a little more technical details of how a public plugin requests a namespace and how it deals with things. Maybe even draw up a mock interface.
Well, we've done the command IDs by convention. You just whoever claims it first owns it.
Right, and I think that's probably how you would have to do those namespaces first, the storage mechanism too. Whoever claims it first owns it, and it's up to you as a person that is constructing the application and registering plugins to avoid conflicts. I certainly don't want a com.jsongrout.www/ whatever ID like in Java. So I have a global state object that is retrieved by each plugin. The state object.
When we say global here, we are defining here the universe. Global means at the application level.
The client application level. That's right. Right. So when I say global, I mean a single instance in this dependency injection framework that Phosphor is providing.
Well, because I mean, the
and
reason
that in
I'm
turn
asking
is talking to the server. So all the instances for the different users are talking to the same endpoint on the server.
I also want to make sure that we keep track of how these are going to synchronize or reconcile or whatever in a Jupyter Hub context when there's many users with their own lab instances arriving, because that's how multiple users, actual individual users with different identities, will end up collaborating, will be through a hub. So we want to make sure that.
So we have many servers here that are collaborating. I mean, so this is a difference with, I think, SageMath Cloud. I think it's a difference with SageMath Cloud, where you have many people running their own web servers that are then all collaborating with the hub, right? And in SageMath Cloud, everybody works through the same web server.
Well, this is the part that's
necessarily.
Up until now, yeah, this is the part that we have to figure out now for real.
Sure.
It could be just one collaborative state server, that the state server is a singleton for all users of the hub.
Yeah.
And then all the. Yeah. I think the collaborative thing has to be a multi-user aware.
Yeah.
So I would suspect that this is that we ship a basic state server for the kind of collaborating with yourself case that's within the notebook package.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jupyter Hub provides the multi-user state server.
And then you don't use the basic state server. You just use
it's not an extra layer. It's a different implementation.
Right, and so that way the notebook server just becomes a kernel state sort of thing.
It can just be the basic server from the owner of the notebook, because you will have an owner and you will have collaborators. And so you can perfectly imagine that one person owns a collaborative server and other servers that collaborate with this person will just talk to each other.
Yeah, I guess that remains an open question, I think. Yeah, that is another option. But I think in both cases, there's only one state server, at least for the collaborated entity. Either it's the single user. Either it's the single user server of the owner, or it's the multi-user thing that's actually running behind the hub. But in either case, there's only one state server.
The single user for the owner, this would be supporting use cases where essentially every session is the same user. They share everything, right? They share everything that you would want to share in two different windows. Right, so I couldn't share one notebook and not another notebook, for example.
I think so. Well, I guess.
Because there's no notion of users. Okay. So global state
shouldn't need to be in the client that's really user aware. That should be handled by the state server, and at least ideally the application wouldn't need to talk to more than one state server, and at the very least one plugin wouldn't. But I would at least start from one application only talks to one state server.
Right.
And then it's kind of the responsibility of the hub to implement the setup for using a multi-user aware state server.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So I have to go in 2 minutes. If you guys, we knew we wouldn't get to the end of this. Obviously today this was a start. You can continue, and somebody can ping me on Gitter, and I can just stop the recording. I can keep an eye on Gitter, but I have to switch to a different meeting. I would hang up, and I don't have to kick you guys out. Or we can finish here and continue Monday or Tuesday.
Let me just summarize in 30 seconds what we can try to start experimenting with. So there's a global state object that's retrieved by each plugin. A plugin registers a namespace, and possibly sub plugins register sub namespaces of that larger namespace. Plugins can post changes, get rejections, and can get notified of changes to the state. And then the state server syncs with the server side for collaboration and refreshing, etc. That sounds like a good experiment to try. Okay.
I don't know when we can poll on List or on Gitter to meet again, or I could do Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. We can try to sync up on Gitter after, because I have to switch over to another meeting.
Yep. Okay, sounds good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the input and the discussion.
No, this is great, and I loved seeing the demo. So thanks.
Great.
Okay,
yeah, thanks,
and then I'll stop the recording. So it seems like you guys are going to switch out. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.